Blue jeans are as American as apple pie. From miners out west in the 1800s, to farmers and factory workers in the early 20th century, to teens in the post-World War II world, to just about everybody these days, jeans are just a staple American clothing item. And it used to be that we exported our denim everywhere. These days, though, it seems like it's being imported from all over the globe, with competition from high-end French fashion houses to Italian designers to Japanese manufacturers. It's harder to profit from selling American jeans. American denim companies are demanding that the government does something to ensure jeans remain an all-American icon. Maybe make it just a little harder for those foreign products to get a foothold here in the States. Maybe erect some sort of barrier. For governments, trade barriers act as a way to control imports and exports. A trade barrier is a government policy that hinders or restricts international trade. Let's say that American denim manufacturers are concerned about how imported jeans are impacting their business. So they start pushing for the government to implement some trade barriers. What might that look like? Would it really help? The most basic trade barrier is called a tariff. Tariffs are taxes that governments place on imported goods. Generally speaking, tariffs are put on imported items that cost less than their American counterparts. These taxes then increase the price of the imported goods, which negatively impacts demand for those goods. If the price of both American and Japanese jeans is $40, the government can then put a tariff of $10 per pair on the imported Japanese jeans, giving a market advantage to the American denim. Another potential strategy the government can use is to set quotas. Quotas are limits on the quantity of a product that can be imported during a particular time period. So, the government can limit the number of jeans imported from France to 10,000 pairs. This limits the supply of those jeans, raising the price and reducing demand. And in addition to making French jeans more expensive, quotas also encourage consumers to buy from American manufacturers. The government can also use subsidies to help domestic manufacturers. If you remember, we discussed subsidies in Unit 9 when we were talking about how to solve the issue of under-provision of public goods. When it comes to international trade, the government can provide financial incentives for American jean producers to invest in new technology. That technology would decrease the time and cost of producing a pair of jeans, reducing the price, and increasing demand for the American-made product. Finally, the government can also introduce product standards for imported jeans. Product standards are requirements designed to ensure safety, quality, or environmental impact of a good or service. Now, the American government can decide that foreign producers of denim must use a certain type of cotton in the product, or that the imported jeans must be made in factories that meet certain safety standards. These increased standards increase the cost of production of a pair of jeans, meaning manufacturers have to charge a higher price to be profitable. And if U.S. manufacturers don't have to meet the same standards as foreign competitors, they have a competitive advantage, letting them sell at a lower price. And with that price difference, who's gonna sell more jeans? Well, American manufacturers, of course. Okay, let's take a moment to check in. A domestic toy company complains to the government that they cannot compete with less expensive imported toys. These imported toys are inexpensive because the companies that produce them use surplus paint that is potentially toxic if eaten. How can the government respond to help ensure domestic toy companies can better compete with their foreign competitors? Pause the video while you answer, and we'll check in when you're finished. Well, the government can impose increased production standards on imported toys that ensure they are made with safe materials. In addition to helping domestic manufacturers compete, these standards can also help protect consumer safety. These trade barriers sound great, right? Protecting domestic manufacturers, helping protect consumer safety, those are all great outcomes. So, why doesn't the government use these trade barriers more aggressively? Well, domestic producers may benefit from the government imposing trade barriers, but how do consumers fare? Let's talk about price first. Adding layers of taxes, limiting the supply of imports, and requiring higher production standards all increase the cost of producing those goods by foreign companies. Those cost increases get passed on to the consumer in the form of higher prices. Plus, all of these trade barriers make it more difficult and less profitable for foreign companies to compete. That means that fewer and fewer imported goods end up in the market, reducing the choice available to consumers. Don't forget that international trade is a two-way street. If our nation puts up trade barriers, other nations can do the same. Maybe our government puts a tariff on jeans imported from Italy. Italian denim manufacturers are negatively impacted by this decision. So, in turn, Italy puts a quota on the number of soccer cleats that the US can export to the football-loving nation, also called calcio in Italy. And oftentimes, these decisions continue to escalate until nations are involved in a trade war. Plus, these trade barriers often result in some pretty significant externalities. The government attempting to help one industry may actually hurt other industries. Let's say that the government is putting up trade barriers to help protect American denim manufacturers. One of the unforeseen results is that even though American jeans make up a larger percentage of jeans being sold, the total number of jeans being sold decreases. And many consumers also purchase dress shirts and sweaters when they are purchasing new pairs of jeans. So, as fewer jeans are being sold, fewer and fewer shirts and sweaters are being sold as well. Now, throughout this course, we've also talked about the correlation between increased competition and increased innovation. Erecting trade barriers may reduce the competition that American denim manufacturing firms face. But what do you think the chances are that the market will see newer and better jeans on the market? Not very good, right? Let's see how you're doing so far. American automobile manufacturers are seeing their sales decrease as more people are buying foreign cars that are more fuel efficient. These companies want the government to put a tariff on foreign cars. How could a government official explain why this might be a bad idea? What could the government suggest the companies do instead? Meet me back here when you're finished. The government official might tell the automobile companies that putting a tariff on imported cars could lead to a trade war that harms the economy. Plus, there might be other industries that are negatively impacted. Instead of putting up a trade barrier, the government might suggest that these car companies look to innovate their product to better compete with imported cars. But if trade barriers can harm consumers and other industries, why would the government even consider implementing them in the first place? One reason is to protect consumer safety. The government doesn't want citizens injured or dying from unsafe products entering into our market. Also, historically speaking, trade barriers have provided the time and space for new domestic industries to develop in order to compete with more established nations. In the early 1800s, the United States put high tariffs on finished textiles from Great Britain, who had a more developed textile industry. This allowed American manufacturers to sell their products at a much lower price than British firms, giving those domestic firms time to grow in size and capability in order to compete with the English manufacturers on a more level playing field. Nations can also use trade barriers to protect national security interests. After World War II, at the height of the Cold War, the American government banned imports and exports from the Soviet Union and its allies. The intention of this decision was to ensure that the Soviets weren't able to access products that could help improve their ability to compete militarily with the US and its allies. Finally, nations can also use trade barriers to push other nations to make changes to their government or economy. In the second half of the 20th century, the nation of South Africa instituted a policy of racial segregation known as apartheid. In the 1980s, the US and other nations placed economic sanctions on South Africa and implemented trade barriers to make it all but impossible to trade with the nation. The goal was to use an economic lever, trade barriers, to implement a political goal, getting South Africa to end its apartheid system. Trade barriers were designed to force South Africa to choose between maintaining their apartheid system or having a healthy economy. While this took time and perseverance, South Africa ultimately ended the apartheid system and was welcomed back into the global economic community. Time for our last check-in. A foreign country just experienced a violent coup that overthrew a democratically elected government. The new leaders are imprisoning their opponents. Nations across the globe are now banning imports from the country as long as the new leaders are in power. What is their rationale? We'll go over the answer once you've finished. By making it more difficult for the economy of the nation in question to thrive, the hope is that the new leaders will step down from power and stop imprisoning their opponents. Okay, let's talk about what we covered today. Trade barriers are government policies that restrict or hinder international trade. While these trade barriers can help protect domestic industries, they can also negatively impact consumers, other businesses, and the nation's economy as a whole. And while governments try to implement them as little as possible, these barriers can serve an important purpose, from protecting consumer safety all the way up to influencing other nations to change systems and behaviors. Tomorrow, we're going to be discussing how different nations navigate and negotiate international trade to ensure that all parties benefit. But until then, keep investing in yourself one lesson at a time. See you next time. Hey!